Men do not fall when armies invade their borders. They fall long before that, when comfort replaces vigilance, when approval becomes more important than authority, when safety becomes more valuable than strength. Long before cities burn, something far more dangerous happens quietly inside the male spirit. The hunger to rise is replaced by the desire to be liked. The instinct to dominate life is traded for the instinct to fit into it. And by the time men realize what they have lost, the chains are already wrapped in velvet. Machiavelli understood this pattern with terrifying clarity. He did not see history as a march toward progress, but as a battlefield of human nature repeating itself under different costumes. Every civilization, he observed, begins with men who are dangerous, disciplined, hardened by struggle, willing to risk everything for power, honor, and survival. These men build states, protect borders, impose order, and carve stability out of chaos. But once stability arrives, the next generation grows up inside comfort instead of conflict. And comfort breeds softness. Softness breeds hesitation. Hesitation breeds dependence. And dependence invites domination. This is how men begin to fall without realizing it. When a society is young and threatened, men value strength above all else. They admire courage, resilience, loyalty, and competence. Power is respected because survival depends on it. But when danger fades and wealth increases, priorities shift. Reputation replaces capability. Appearances replace discipline. Entertainment replaces training. Men begin optimizing for pleasure instead of preparedness. They stop asking how to become formidable and start asking how to be accepted. Machiavelli warned that the greatest enemy of a strong republic or kingdom is not an invading force. It is prolonged peace. Because peace slowly erodes the virtues that created strength in the first place. It trains men to expect stability instead of earning it. It conditions them to avoid discomfort instead of mastering it. Over time, the warrior becomes a consumer. The builder becomes a spectator. The leader becomes a performer. And when men become performers, real power quietly moves elsewhere. This is where the downfall accelerates. Machiavelli observed that weak men are drawn to systems that promise protection without effort. They prefer laws over courage, bureaucracy over personal responsibility, and institutions over individual strength. On the surface, this looks like progress. More rules, more rights, more safety nets. But beneath it is a dangerous psychological shift. Men stop seeing themselves as guardians of their own fate and begin seeing themselves as dependents of a system. The moment a man believes something else will always save him, he stops sharpening himself. And when millions of men think this way, a society becomes fragile, no matter how rich it looks. In strong ages, men governed themselves. In declining ages, men beg to be governed. Machiavelli knew that once men lose the will to defend their own power, they invite rulers who will gladly take it. Not tyrants at first, administrators, managers, technocrats, people who promise order, fairness, and security. The language always sounds moral. The intention always sounds protective. But the result is always the same. Authority concentrates upward as individual strength dissolves downward. Weak men do not overthrow freedom. They trade it away piece by piece in exchange for comfort, and they always believe they are being civilized while it happens. Another sign of male downfall Machiavelli highlighted is the loss of strategic thinking. Strong men are long-term thinkers. They endure short-term pain for long-term dominance. Weak men become addicted to immediate pleasure and emotional relief. They avoid confrontation. They delay hard decisions. They chase distractions. They confuse feeling good with living well. When men stop mastering impulse, society becomes impulsive. When men stop delaying gratification, nations start decaying. Because power, personal or political, is built on discipline, patience, and calculated sacrifice. The man who cannot control himself will always be controlled by someone who can. Machiavelli saw that once men become pleasure-driven, they become predictable. And predictable men are easy to manipulate. They can be bribed with comfort, distracted with entertainment, pacified with small rewards and frightened with the threat of losing convenience. They no longer need chains, their habits become the cage. The most dangerous moment in a civilization is not when enemies gather at the gates, but when men inside the walls forget why the walls were built. When strength becomes something remembered instead of practiced. When struggle becomes something avoided instead of mastered. When men inherit comfort without inheriting the discipline that created it. Machiavelli understood that every stable society carries within it the seeds of its own decay, because peace slowly convinces men that strength is no longer necessary. Once that belief takes root, decline accelerates invisibly. Men begin outsourcing hardship. Physical struggle is replaced by convenience. Mental struggle is replaced by entertainment. Moral struggle is replaced by public opinion. Instead of building themselves into formidable individuals, they seek systems to cushion them from discomfort. The gym becomes optional, courage becomes unnecessary, responsibility becomes negotiable, and soon the average man becomes softer not just in body, but in will. Machiavelli would have recognized this immediately. He knew that power belongs to those who can endure what others avoid. It always has. Every dominant class in history trained itself in hardship, while the masses drifted into ease. But when comfort spreads to everyone, when struggle is engineered out of daily life, the entire population begins to weaken together. And when everyone weakens together, the society becomes vulnerable to any group willing to reintroduce discipline and force. This is why rising powers always look harsher than falling ones. They train harder, they tolerate less weakness, they demand sacrifice. Declining societies call this cruelty, rising societies call it survival. Weak men always misunderstand strong men because they cannot imagine choosing pain voluntarily. Machiavelli warned that luxury is far more dangerous than poverty. Poverty forces adaptation. Luxury dissolves resilience. When men grow accustomed to comfort, they lose the ability to endure hardship when it inevitably returns. They panic under pressure. They fracture under stress. They look for saviors instead of solutions. And history never spares those who cannot endure. Another quiet marker of male downfall is the collapse of loyalty. In strong eras, men bond through shared struggle. Brotherhood is forged in hardship, danger, and responsibility. But in soft eras, relationships become transactional and temporary. Friendships are built on convenience instead of commitment. Communities fragment into individuals pursuing private comfort. Men stop standing for one another because standing costs something. Once loyalty disappears, collective strength vanishes. Machiavelli understood that no state can survive without men willing to defend it personally. Mercenaries, institutions, and paid protectors always fail eventually. Only men who feel ownership of their society will fight for it when it matters. But soft men feel no ownership. They see the state as a service provider, not a shared destiny. They complain when it fails instead of defending it when it weakens. This is the psychology of decline. Men become customers of civilization rather than builders of it. And customers always abandon what becomes difficult. As male resilience erodes, fear grows. Declining societies become obsessed with safety. Every risk must be regulated. Every danger must be minimized. Every discomfort must be softened. On the surface, this looks humane, but psychologically, it trains men to see life as something to be avoided rather than confronted. Machiavelli knew that courage is a muscle. When not used, it atrophies. A society that protects men from all hardship eventually produces men incapable of facing any hardship. And hardship always returns. It returns through economic crises, through wars, through political upheaval, through social collapse, through natural disasters, through technological disruption. No civilization escapes cycles of stress. The only question is whether its men are hardened enough to endure when the storm comes. Strong societies bend and survive. Weak societies break and submit. Another layer of decline Machiavelli would recognize today is the replacement of honor with validation. In strong cultures, men pursue honor, respect earned through competence, courage, and contribution. In declining cultures, men chase approval, likes, praise, emotional reassurance, social acceptance. Honor requires self-discipline. Approval requires conformity. The more men crave approval, the less they are willing to stand alone, speak unpopular truths, or endure discomfort for long-term strength. They begin shaping themselves around what feels good socially instead of what works in reality. And once men are governed by public opinion, they become easily controlled by whoever manipulates that opinion best. Machiavelli understood propaganda long before the word existed. He knew that weak men are emotionally reactive men, and emotionally reactive men can be steered like livestock. A man who cannot tolerate discomfort cannot tolerate truth. A man who cannot tolerate truth will accept illusions, and a society built on illusions always collapses when reality intrudes. As male strength declines, leadership changes character. Instead of warriors, builders, and strategists rising to the top, performers and manipulators do. Those skilled at appearances replace those skilled at outcomes. Politics becomes theater. Institutions become branding exercises. Authority flows to those who can manage perception rather than those who can manage crises. Machiavelli warned that when image overtakes substance, collapse is not far behind, because perception cannot stop famine. Perception cannot stop invasion. Perception cannot rebuild broken systems. Only competence can. But declining societies reward charisma more than capability, emotion more than discipline, promises more than results. And when real danger arrives, they discover too late that they promoted the wrong men. This is when desperation sets in. Once systems fail and comforts disappear, weak men suddenly demand strong rulers to restore order. The same population that spent decades rejecting discipline now begs for authority. The same men who mocked strength now crave control, and so history swings toward harsh leadership, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. What Machiavelli actually shows is something far more unsettling than a simple rise and fall of comfort. He shows that decline begins when men lose the capacity to read reality as it is. In strong ages, men understand power, danger, and human nature instinctively. They expect betrayal, prepare for conflict, and structure their lives around self-reliance. In weakened ages, men begin projecting morality onto a world that does not operate morally. They assume fairness where there is competition. They assume safety where there is rivalry. They assume intentions matter more than outcomes. This is not kindness, it is strategic blindness, and strategic blindness is what destroys nations. When men stop thinking in terms of power, leverage, and consequence, they do not become peaceful. They become vulnerable. The world does not become gentler because men soften. It simply becomes more predatory toward them. Machiavelli warned repeatedly that those who rely on goodwill rather than strength are always the first to be crushed when circumstances shift, not because others are evil, but because human nature always moves toward advantage. Weak men imagine society runs on ideals. Strong men know it runs on interests. Once a population of men is raised to believe conflict is abnormal rather than permanent, they stop preparing for it. Once they are taught that stability is a natural state instead of a temporary condition, they stop defending it. Once they are trained to seek comfort instead of competence, they begin losing without even recognizing the battle. This is the real downfall Machiavelli feared. Not brutality, not dictatorship, not even corruption, but naivete. A society of naive men can be governed, exploited, redirected, and dominated with very little resistance. Another transformation he observed in decaying states is the shift from virtù to dependency. Virtù for Machiavelli was not moral goodness, it was strength of character, decisiveness, courage, adaptability, and the ability to impose one's will on chaos. Strong eras prized this. Declining eras replaced it with entitlement, legalism, and emotional appeals. Men stopped cultivating personal power and started demanding protection, fairness, and comfort from structures above them. And structures always serve those who control them. Once men surrender self-reliance, they place their survival into systems that can be manipulated by elites, factions, and rulers. At that point, Freedom still exists in language, but power no longer exists in reality. The population becomes manageable, predictable, administrable. This is when decline becomes irreversible, because men who cannot stand on their own cannot resist when authority tightens. Machiavelli understood that every ruling class prefers a population that is orderly, dependent, and psychologically domesticated, not violently oppressed. That creates rebellion, but comfortably controlled. A man who is busy seeking entertainment, security, and emotional reassurance does not organize resistance. He does not challenge authority. He does not defend autonomy. He adapts, and adaptation is how freedom disappears without conflict. This is why late societies obsess over distraction, endless content, endless debate, endless stimulation. Not because someone planned it from the beginning, but because distraction becomes the most efficient form of control once men lose internal discipline. A focused, resilient, strategic population is hard to rule. A distracted one governs itself into submission. Machiavelli would have recognized the modern world immediately, not as advanced, but as pacified. He would have seen men surrounded by comfort yet anxious, informed yet confused, connected yet powerless, men with endless opinions and very little influence, men who talk about justice while lacking leverage, men who debate morality while others quietly accumulate power. And he would have known exactly what stage of history that represents. It is the stage where institutions grow larger than individuals, where rules replace courage, where procedure replaces leadership, where safety replaces sovereignty, where men become functionaries inside systems they no longer control. At this stage, power no longer needs to conquer, it simply administers. The downfall of men, then, is not dramatic. It is bureaucratic. It happens through policies instead of battles, through dependency instead of defeat, through comfort instead of catastrophe, through slow psychological surrender rather than violent overthrow. Men wake up one day governed by forces they no longer understand, unable to resist because they have not trained themselves to endure struggle for generations. And when real crises arrive, economic collapse, war, resource scarcity, political upheaval, they discover too late that resilience was the one thing they traded away. Machiavelli's warning was ultimately about preparedness, not paranoia, not cruelty, preparedness of mind, preparedness of will, preparedness for human nature as it truly is. He knew that peace is always temporary, stability is always conditional, prosperity is always fragile. The only constant in history is struggle over power, resources, and control. Civilizations that remember this survive longer. Civilizations that forget it dissolve quietly. The downfall of men begins the moment men start believing the world has outgrown conflict. Machiavelli never believed decline was caused by bad rulers alone. He believed it was permitted by weakened men. Tyranny does not rise in a vacuum. It rises where populations have lost the will, skill, and discipline to guard their own power. When men no longer understand force, strategy, and consequence, they begin mistaking submission for peace and regulation for stability. And by the time they recognize the difference, the structure of control is already permanent. This is the most uncomfortable truth in Machiavelli's thought. Freedom is not something granted by systems. It is something maintained by men, capable of defending it. The moment a society produces more consumers than guardians, more spectators than builders, more dependents than leaders, its decline has already begun, regardless of how advanced its technology appears. Empires do not fall because they lack laws. They fall because they lack men with virtù. They fall when men stop training themselves to endure hardship, think strategically, and confront reality without illusion. They fall when strength becomes suspicious, discipline becomes unpopular, and responsibility becomes something to outsource. Machiavelli understood that every generation is tested, not by comfort, but by whether it will preserve the qualities that created comfort in the first place. Some generations rise to that burden. Others slowly dissolve under the luxury they inherited, and history never shows mercy to the second group. The question Machiavelli leaves us with is not about politics. It is about the individual man. Will you live as a product of a soft age, reactive, dependent, distracted, shaped by comfort and fear? Or will you become the kind of man who could survive the return of hardship, disciplined, resilient, strategic, and internally governed? Because when systems fail, and they always eventually do, only the men who have prepared themselves remain free. Civilizations are rebuilt by such men, and civilizations are lost when too few of them exist. This is the downfall Machiavelli warned about, not the fall of governments, the fall of male strength itself. If this message challenged you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Support the channel in the link below so we can keep producing deeper philosophical content like this, and subscribe, because understanding power, human nature, and history is no longer optional in the world we're entering. The men who prepare will shape what comes next.